Hi. So before we move on, there's a very small topic that I want to cover, and that is apart from the handle func, you can also use the handle method, and I'm just going to cover that in just a bit. So we know that using handle func, we saw in the last session that we were able to get the output that we see in the screen right now. Okay, so typing login here also gives me an HTML content here. Okay. Now we know that HandleFunc is a function in HTTP and it accepts the pattern and a function that has the same signature as the handler handler interfaces method. So handler interface has a method called serve HTTP and this method has a particular signature. So it accepts a response writer and a pointer to the request. Okay. So this function also has the same signature, although it doesn't have the same name. It doesn't, its name is not server HTTP, its name is my login. Okay, so it is not, first of all, this is a function, it's not a method. So it's not the same as handler, but at least the method signature is the same as the server HTTP. Okay, so that is what this HTTP handle func is expecting. But there's a different way of actually implementing the same thing, okay? And that is by using HTTP handle method. So HTTP handle method, if you see, it accepts a pattern and handler, okay? It doesn't accept a function, it accepts a handler. And let me just go back here and show you. If I hover over this one accepts a handler as well, but the handler is actually of type function, whereas here this one accepts a handler which is of type handler, which is this. Okay, this could get quite confusing, and that's why I actually had to find a way to put it all together so that you guys can actually tell it apart easily. Okay, so this is exactly the same as this. Okay, for now I'm just going to comment this out, and if I save this, so the build is happening, it's happened. If I go back here, I still see the same output. Okay, it's the same output. The only difference is uh, this one accepts a handler, it doesn't accept a function. So how do we get a handler here? Well, one of the ways we can get a handler is by using HTTP handle func. Now, handle func, it looks like it's a method, but it's not. Handle func is actually a type. Okay, and all I have to do is I have to actually pass it the function that I had here, and it gives me the handler. In fact, at this point, it would be nice if you have a look at the code, which is very simple to understand. So you can see that handler func is actually a separate type in its own way, which is underneath it, it's actually a function that has this particular signature. But because it is a type, it can also have methods to it. And one of the methods that it has is server HTTP response writer pointed to the request. Okay. Uh, and as part of the execution of this method, it actually just calls this function which is this. Okay, and it just calls this function with the same argument as response writer and pointer to the request. So handler func in itself is actually a handler because not only it has the same method signature, the method name is also the same. So handler func is as good as a signature. So the point that I want to get across to you is that even though this looks like a method invocation with some argument, it's not that. It is in fact a type conversion. Okay, so this is not a handler, this was a function which had the same method signature but a different name. This is a handler. Okay, it's because handler func is a handler, and it's getting past this particular function which has the same method signature as the server HTTP method. Okay, so these both are essentially doing the same thing, but implementations are slightly different. And because they're slightly different, they are also confusing at the same time. Okay, so these are two ways of doing the same thing. Now, if you remember in one of our previous sessions, we actually implemented a particular type and made them implement this particular interface. That was the handler interface. So let's do it again. So I've got two types here, login and welcome. Both are of underlying type for both of them is integer. Okay, and I'm actually implementing this method serve HTTP. So it's the same method with the same name and the same signature as this. Okay, and for both of them the implementation is different though. In here I'm printing on login page, in here I'm printing on welcome page, so the response message is different. Okay, and so both of these types are now kind of handlers. So if I have a variable of type login, okay, it is going to be a handler. So that's what I've done here. So let me do this. Let me uncomment it. So I've got two variables. One is of type login, another one is of type welcome. And when I do HTTP handle here, it's the same pattern, but this time it is just a variable. The variable doesn't have any value right now. They've just been declared, not initialized, and it is okay. But I'm just using the handler, the variable reference here. Okay, and that is because this I and j, both of them are handlers. So like what we were doing here is we were actually using type conversion of handler func here to convert those functions to handlers. Here we have handlers themselves that implement the same method in the handler interface. Okay, and that's why I can directly pass them here. I don't need to do any kind of type conversion that I did here. Okay, and when I save this and run it, if I come back here, the message is gonna be different because I'm actually printing a different message. Okay, and that's fine. So the message is here on welcome page for the welcome endpoint, and if you go to the login endpoint, it's on login page, which is totally fine. The important point was to understand the difference between all these three. Okay, handle func actually accepts the pattern and the function that is the same signature but doesn't have to be the same name. Handle accepts the pattern and handler. Okay, the handler could be a handler, a clear cut handler, or it could be a type converted handler using handler func type. Okay, the handler func type conversion would have to be done on a method that has the same signature as serve HTTP. All right, I hope this makes sense because this gets kind of confusing among a lot of people. And I think if you haven't understood it well, maybe just watch this video again, and then maybe it takes a bit of time to actually to have the whole concept sunk in your mind. So I think that was uh, well explained, and I'll see you in the next session with more details on multiplexer and routers. Thank you very much.